This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen, creative people, why they do it, how they do it, how they hang in. That's what I love to talk about. And today we have something a little bit different. I got to host a panel of authors recently at the Pride Live Hollywood Festival. And the audio from the panel turned out so good and the content was so great that I'm making this an episode of the podcast. So the people you'll be hearing from on this panel are Nancy Beverly. She's the author of the novel Shelby's Vacation. We also have Curtis Chin, the author of Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. He's been on the podcast before. We have Jim Colucci, author of Golden Girls Forever. He's been on the podcast. And so has Frank DeCaro, the author of Disco, Music, Movies, and Mania, Under the Mirrored Ball. Alonso Duralde is also on the panel. He's the author of Hollywood Pride, also a friend of the pod. We have Rasheed Newson. His book is called My Government Means to Kill Me. And we have Mark B. Perry. His novel is called And Introducing Dexter Gaines. And finally, Bruce Vilanch with his book, It Seemed Like a Bad Idea at the Time. So I had a lot of fun moderating this panel. I think everybody came with some very thoughtful things, and I hope you enjoy it. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that it's Podcast Awards season. They give out these things called the Podcast Awards, and my pals Derek and Romaine, they've won it so many times that they're taking themselves out of the running for Best Gay Host, and they're pushing me for it. So, I'll take it. It's like when Oprah's decided I don't need any more Emmys. But anyway, here's how you can vote for me. You have to do it this month, and then the nominations will come out later. But you go to podcastawards.com. There is a blue button that you press on that says click here to vote. And then you have to either register or log in if you've already registered. And then while you're registering, make sure to click a box that says, please consider me as one of the listeners that will be randomly selected to vote for the final in August. So that's important. And then you find Dennis Anyone in the LGBTQIA category and you say, click. Yes, you click me. And then while you're at it, why don't you show some love for my friends, Derek and Romaine? Write their name under biggest podcast influencer, type Derek and Romaine, and then vote for my friend Romaine Show, the Dildo Whisperer, in the following categories: the Adam Curry People's Choice Award, Health, and Female Hosted Podcast. All that happens at podcastawards.com. I asked Romaine what you win if you win it, and I don't think you win anything, but it would be nice to win anyway. And, you know what? And frankly, it's an honor to be pre-nominated. So I thank you for doing that. The other thing you can do if you like this, support this podcast, is go to DennisAnyone.net and leave a tip in my virtual tip jar. Help me cover my expenses. Like, it costs $50 to submit to this podcast awards thing, but who's counting? And the other thing, I have this Substack and Patreon additional episode that I do once a week called Dennis Hensley's Happy and Gay. It's $5 a month. It's about a half hour, maybe sometimes more. It's fun, creativity-related content like I have on the podcast, but I end with something about happiness, the topic that's become very interesting to me in the last few years. What does the science tell us about it? How can we be more happy in our lives? Things that have helped me, and I just like to muse on it. So that's Dennis Hensley's Happy and Gay at Patreon and Substack. And you can also consider becoming a subscriber to DNR Studios. That's Derek and Romaine, my friends. They have this podcast network. I'm part of it. And you can subscribe and get my show early for a monthly fee and all these other fun gay shows. So learn about that at dnrstudios.com. All right, here now is the authors panel from Pride Live Hollywood that we did last month. It was a total blast, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So we have a great panel of authors here. So joining me first is the author of Shelby's Vacation. Give it up for Nancy Beverly. The author of Hollywood Pride, it's Alonso Duralde. And booking you in June is not easy, Alonso. You're everywhere. All right. The author of My Government Means to Kill Me, it's Rasheed Newson. Welcome to the panel. The book is called And Introducing Dexter Gaines. Welcome, Mark P. Perry. Anywhere you like. And we've got Frank DeCaro, the author of Disco, but it has a long subtitle. Let me get it right.
What is it?
I got it. Disco, Music, Movies, and Mania, Under the Mirrored Ball.
Thank you. That's it.
And Jim Colucci, the author of Golden West Forever. And Bruce Chin, the author of Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. And finally, Bruce Vilanch, the author of It Seemed Like a Bad Idea at the Time. I'm very lucky because I've had at least half of you on my podcast, which is awesome, and hopefully I'll have the others soon. To start us off with, since we have so many folks, we're just going to go down the line, say what your book is, maybe a little bit about it, and then why you wanted to write it. What inspired you to make it happen? So we'll start here.
Greetings, Earthlings. Hey, my name is Nancy Beverly. My book is Shelby's Vacation. It's a lesbian romance with a lot of humor because I used to work in sitcoms. It's about a woman who gets lost on her way to a vacation. She ends up in a mountain resort and develops something with the manager up there named Carol.
Oh, hi. My name is Curtis Chin. I'm the author of Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. I grew up in Detroit in the 80s. Terrible time for my hometown. The auto industry was struggling. There was crack cocaine. There was AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18. But despite that, we had this fabulous Chinese restaurant in the inner city of Detroit where my parents were able to raise me and my 5 siblings and teach us all the life skills that we needed to get on with our lives. And so that's the book.
I'm Bruce Vilanch, and I'm contractually obligated to tell you I am not Travis Kelce's mother. I know the resemblance is startling. Absolutely. So I wrote a book called It Seemed Like a Bad Idea at the Time, and it's about how I wrote the worst television shows in history and lived. And so did the shows, apparently, because I was doing these podcasts during COVID, and these people who were not yet born when I wrote these shows were asking me about them. They'd seen them on YouTube, and they wanted to know how who said yes to this, and have they paid their debt to society. And so it's a chronicle. It's a kind of a backing into a memoir, but about all the stuff that didn't work, of which I'm very proud because now everybody knows about all that stuff. So shit lives. What can I tell you?
I'm Mark Perry, and my novel is Introducing Dexter Gaines, a novel of old Hollywood. And it starts with the oldest trope in the world. A handsome young man comes to Los Angeles fleeing his troubled past to see if he can make it in the movies. And then it takes an unexpected turn and goes somewhere else. So, and the reason I wrote this book was because after so many years of writing network television, I really wanted to see if I could. And then I decided I would just write about all the things I love, like old Hollywood, Los Angeles, Barbara Stanwyck, Tool the Bankhead, just a whole pastiche of things. So that's my book.
I've been armed.
Excellent.
Hello, my name is Rasheed Newson. I wrote a book called My Government Needs to Kill Me. It is a political and sexual coming of age about a gay black man in the 1980s who goes there to have a good time and does manage to have a bit of a good time, but also gets into the fight against AIDS and joins ACT UP. And I think I wrote it because I sort of spent my whole life watching a lot of movies and books about the period, which are wonderful, but they always sort of ended with 4 white men standing at the beach holding each other. And I had heard that it affected other people too. So I just wanted to write something that kind of brought more people into that conversation.
I'm Frank DeCaro. I was 2 of those white men standing there. Didn't like the beach so much. I've written a book called Disco Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirror Ball. And I wrote it because I had done a previous book on the history of drag in show business. And somebody said to me, they got all weepy about it. They said, you're asking us questions and featuring us in your book, a drag performer. And they said, we're always the glitter or the parsley. We're never the subject of something. And they said, you're giving us, finally, the respect that we deserve. And so I started thinking, well, what else do I think deserves more respect? And disco seemed to be the answer to that because it's a genre I've loved. And everyone was starting to talk about how disco really was, to quote the title of a wonderful PBS documentary, the soundtrack of a revolution. that for women and people of color in the queer community, this was this watershed moment. And so I wanted to celebrate all that was good about disco and also tell other people it's okay to love the bad stuff too. That you can be impressed with Donna Summer doing I Feel Love, which is a song that is 50 years old and still sounds like the future. And you can also have a soft spot for the Brady Bunch Variety Hour doing Disco Duck. So that's the gist of the book.
I'm Alonso Duralde. My book is Hollywood Pride. It was actually pitched to me by Running Press, who does the books for Turner Classic Movies, and it's a history of queer people in Hollywood, on screen and off. So it's a look back at 130 years worth of queer presence and absence in mainstream movies, but also a tribute to the many actors and writers and directors and producers and Barbara Stanwyck and Tallulah Bankhead and a lot of other people who basically created cinema and made the movies the movies.
Hi, I'm Jim Colucci, and my book is Golden Girls Forever, which is really the reason I wrote it is it was a lifelong aspiration to write it, especially having gotten into journalism and writing about TV shows for TV Guide. I said the first thing I want to do is a book about the Golden Girls. I ended up doing a book about Will and Grace first, and that was another wonderful thing that I got to do because I love that show. However, I finally did get to do the Golden Girls after a lot of red tape cutting and got to spend time with Betty White in her sunny Brentwood living room with her flunked out rescue dog, her flunked out seeing eye dog, Pontiac, with the golden retriever lying on my feet. And I got to stay at B. Arthur's house after our interview and split an entire bottle of wine with her, which was the condition for coming over to her house. And so those are the moments where you, in this career, you say, oh my God, this is surreal, how did I get here? So that's why I wrote that book.
How many glasses was that bottle of wine?
Well, when you have giant glasses like B had procured, two.
Jim, hold on to that mic. I have a couple questions for everybody individually that we'll just work our way back down since you have the mic. With the Golden Girls, does the popularity of it go in waves? Do people turn to it when things are hard and then you see the ratings go up? Or is it people always love the Golden Girls?
I'll bet that within the overall trend of it still growing, there are moments where it rises and falls because there are moments where it's too disturbing to watch the news at 11 o'clock as you're falling asleep, and I hear anecdotally how people love watching it on Hallmark at 11, even though most of us have the technology to watch it on Hulu or watch it on DVD or watch it on demand whenever you want. There's something about tuning in at that special hour, having that ritual at night, unwinding with it. It's something that you can listen to and feel relaxed, and to the point where when Hallmark switches over to Christmas programming, they get angry letters from Golden Girls fans saying, how dare you take away my Golden Girls at 11? It's like, you could find it somewhere else. So I do think that in times of disturbance, it probably is an uptick, but what really drew me to writing the book in the first place, other than getting to spend time getting drunk with B. Arthur, was that I could tell, at first I couldn't tell, I was watching it in the 90s when it was repeated on Lifetime, to the point where I was so addicted to it that I would be late for work because it was on in the morning and I didn't want to miss the end of the episode, so I'll just be late. And I thought, am I the only person who's doing this? I must be the only one. And then, as the internet came around and we had more community and more ways of comparing notes, I realized I was not. And that the Golden Girls really, until the advent of streaming, where I'll say that there are probably some shows that will join the list, which might be Friends, The Office, a few others. But until more really recent times, I think only I Love Lucy and the Golden Girls are shows that continue on and continue growing long past the first generation of viewers who were watching them live. Because most shows, as popular as they are, eventually wane in popularity. The audience dies off. The audience finds something new. But the Golden Girls and I Love Lucy both, and as I said, maybe some other shows now with streaming, are finding new generations and new homes. And so that's kind of, that inspires me to write a book. The book will be a perennial seller, and it has been.
I have to watch the theme song when I watch it. I don't zoom through. I'm not sure why. What is it? What's the secret sauce? Why?
I think for different communities, I think it's different. And I think that for the LGBT community, we probably feel the central theme of surrogate family more strongly than even other people do, because we've done that. We've created our own surrogate families. But I hear just about everyone say that it's this fantasy about even for, say, straight people, for straight women who they know they're either going to be divorced or widowed. The odds are they'll outlive the husband. Maybe they don't even like the husband, and they'd rather be living with their friends. And this fantasy that you will have 3 people around you who only one is related by blood, but maybe none are related to you by blood, who will take care of you and see you through everything and make life fabulous, to the point where old age isn't about nursing homes and bedpans. It's about going out to a different charity function that you're throwing every night. I mean, the fantasy element that they wake up every night at 2 in the morning to have cheesecake that doesn't make them fat, and when they wake up they're in full hair and makeup. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Alonso Duralde, your movie is about all kinds of movies, or your book is about all kinds of movies related to queer content and queer characters. What surprised you in your research and when you went to write this? What did you not know about? What was like, because you know a lot about movies. What were you surprised by?
Yeah, it was definitely an opportunity to discover everything I didn't know, and it turned out to be a lot. Definitely, I think there were people that I would encounter that were new to me that was like, oh, wow. Like James Crabe, for example, who, a name you might not know, he was the cinematographer of Rocky and the Karate Kid. So he's like shot the movies your dad loves. But he was part of this kind of loosely affiliated group of gay men in the film industry in the 1960s called the Gay Girls Writing Club. And they would make these campy short films that were parodies of popular movies, like What Really Happened to Baby Jane, or my favorite is A Roman Springs at Mrs. Stone. And those have all been restored. You can watch.
They exist. Where can you see them?
You can watch them on Tubi. They're on Blu-ray. Like the American Genre Film Archive has restored them. So I didn't know about him. Didn't know about the club. That was amazing. I didn't know about Angela Morton, who was the first openly trans person to be nominated for an Oscar. She was nominated for 2 in the 70s. Had been a lifelong musician and played in jazz bands and composed like music for the radio for Britain, for radio shows, and then wound up being an arranger on like her nominations were for I think The Slipper and the Rose and The Little Prince, but wound up being like John Williams's arranger. So, Star Wars, Schindler's List, Superman, Angela Morton was there, conducting the orchestras and working with John Williams on those. So, these titans of the industry who, because they're below the line, don't get the spotlight they get, but, did amazing work and were, super queer.
I love that. With a book like this, there's probably a lot of stuff that didn't make it, that wanted to make it. What's the thing that you were, secretly this has to be in it? Even if it's not, a huge, title that we think of, it's, your sentimental pick.
Well, at one point, I had a survey. This was back when Twitter was not a cesspool. And I said, hey, bisexuals, what's the movie that isn't, inherently bisexual that made you bisexual? And overwhelmingly, the answer was The Mummy.
The Rachel Weisz,
Brendan Fraser, The Mummy. I don't know what it is about that movie, and I still need a bisexual person to explain it to me.
They're both attractive?
Yeah, I guess. I think you saw the two of them on screen and were like, yes, that. So I was like, okay, there's nothing queer about this movie, but I have to include it. And I keep seeing it now in the culture. Bisexuals talking about The Mummy being this cornerstone movie of their version of queer life. So I'm like, all right.
I love it. I support it. Good. Yeah. All right, Frank DeCaro.
Yes.
I devoured your book.
Thank you.
Since it's come out, are there people from the disco world that were like, me, you need to do part 2? Or were there things that came out after you finished where they were like they wanted to get on the fabulous Frank DeCaro action?
Performers, Franz Jolie wanted to be part of our festival, and I wish I could have said yes, but there was no budget to bring her in for that, so that was nice. I don't know if anyone has really gotten in touch with me and saying, hi, why was I not in your book? However, I am upset because, you do these books and you really think you're being thorough. And the book is really a kitchen sink approach to the pop history of disco. However, I did not know there was a disco episode of Family. And
with Lucy McNichol?
Yes, and apparently Priscilla Lopez from A Chorus Line was the bad influence, the bad disco influence on Buddy. And I didn't know this was there, and somebody said, you did put that in, didn't you? And I was like, and then the F word is the first thing you say because you're like, didn't know that was there, and now it's not there. However, I adapted the book for Emmy Magazine, a chapter on TV for Emmy Magazine, and I put it in there, so I made up for it. But that was the thing that struck me, because you always think, oh, please let me get this right. I think Jim and I always talk about this. One of the reasons we do the books we do is because somebody gave us a book on TV weddings, and on the first page, they called Barbara Feldman Barbara Feldman. And the two of us were just like, why did they know and catch? Rosie O'Donnell's book calls Brett Summers from Match Game Brett Sumner. It's like, was there not one person at the publishing house who watched Match Game? It's so it's that was kind of an influential. I didn't answer your question.
No, you did. You talked about family. I got misty-eyed at the Donna Summer part of your book. Not just because of the content of what she said, but the way it came to be in the book. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. In 1999, Donna Summer had fallen out with the gay community ages ago because she said God made something along the lines of God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And having interviewed her, I realized she was trying to be, I want to believe she was trying to be funny and didn't land it. I don't think it was a horrible religious condemnation of gay couples at all. I think she wasn't. Her patter when you see her on stage is terrible, and trying to make a joke is forget it. I really think she just blew it with that. So she was kind of having a moment again at the fin de siècle America. Now, in 1999, she'd done that song, Compte Par Tiro, I Will Go With You. And it was this wonderful, wonderful disco song. And she was doing a VH1 Live and More special and stuff. She had all this stuff going on. So back in those days, a magazine would send you to interview someone. So they sent me to Nashville, where she was living. And we had lunch set up for the next day, and I was so late that there was only a drive-through open across from the hotel, and I walked through a drive-through like on Designing Women. I'm here in the vehicle in which I was born. Let me through the drive-through. So I had to order at the window like a car. And the next day I met her for lunch, and we talked for a couple of hours. And what was strange to me was that she was sitting there, and some kid came up and said, Mrs. Sedano, can we have a sleepover? And she just was somebody's mother, and not the queen of disco. Anyway, so Jim said to me, you've interviewed her. You have to find those notes. It's like, you can't do this book without that interview. I'm lazy. I was looking, and then I didn't find it in a half an hour, and I gave up. And then he yelled at me again, and then I looked again, and this just kept going on over probably several months. And I finally thought, I wouldn't have taped the interview. I was old-fashioned. I used to take notes in those reporters' notebooks, by hand. And I thought, I should look. And I found a box in storage in our house back east, and damn it if there weren't 2 hours of our lunch on microcassette. And of course my microcassette was dead, so the recorder was dead. So I had to buy a used one because they don't make them anymore on eBay. And I digitized the conversation. So and I'm going, just play through once. You can break if you want after. Just play. And it did. And so I got all 2 hours, and I transcribed it, and I turned it into this never-before-seen interview. Because as it turned out, the TV Guide story was things like, I live in Nashville now. I love to paint. My daughter comes home from school. It was all bullshit quotes like that, and nothing about her disco career. And so I had all this disco. I was like, please let me have asked about her career. And I did, and it was all there. So that is how it happened. But you need to have been in the right place at the right time. You need for the Lord not to take your tape away over 25 years. And you need a husband to pester you to find it, or it never would have been heard from again. So anyway.
And also what she says in the interview felt like it was perfect for your book. It wasn't just that you had it, it was what she was saying. It was magic that way.
I was hearing the tape. Every person up here, if you write, I think it's probably nonfiction, but it's probably true when you write fiction, where you probably go, "Oh, that's the end." You figure out what the thing is. And she had said something like, I said, "How have you never become a nostalgia act? That your music still sounds good." And she said something along the lines of, "I think of my music as for then and for now and for always." And I was like, "And that's the end of my book." So it was like that gift from the heavens. But I do think Donna sent me to find your tapes to make up for the joke that didn't land about Adam and Steve. So
you've righted a gay controversy that's been decades. You've solved it.
As an intellectual, she's a wonderful singer. That's what I came away with. She was a lot of malapropism and a lot, and it just was like, you know what, you don't need to be because you have that gorgeous voice, and it doesn't matter if you're not, the best speaker, but. Because her patter is if you listen to her live record, you're just like, that's the worst patter. And I'm raised on patter that Bruce wrote for Bette Midler. So it's the best patter anyone's ever said on stage in any of our lives. And so when you hear her saying, "I can't make you feel good if you don't feel good already," and it's like, okay. It's not quite a Sophie Tucker joke or something you can repeat the next day. So, anyway.
Rasheed, your book is called "My Government Means to Kill Me." Talk to me about the title. Was it provocative? Was it controversial? Where did it come from?
It's becoming more timely every day.
Exactly.
No, it was... I'm not great with titles. I've written a lot of television, more than 30 episodes, and my writing partner always comes up with the title.
Right.
And so I was writing this book, and I just referred to it in my head as an aggressive act of faggotry.
Right.
But I didn't think they'd put that in Barnes & Nobles. And so then a character in the book, while I was writing, just said those words, "My government means to kill me." And it was like Frank said, you stop and you're like, there it is. I wasn't trying to find the title that day. It just it showed up on the screen. I thought that sums up what this is all about.
I've had a few moments like that as a writer where it almost feels like you're cheating. Something happens in the restaurant next to you and you're like, "Yep, I'll take it." It almost feels to something oh, okay. Well, it feels sneaky in a way.
We're told everything's supposed to be difficult, so when something does just land in your lap, you don't trust it.
Yeah.
Right? It can't be this simple, right?
Yeah.
But you start floating it with friends, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah,
that's it.
That's it."
Now, your novel is set in the 80s. You're youthful and dewy. That you must have researched, right? How did you find out about ACT UP and all that stuff?
Well, I'm 46 for the record, which is I was alive, but not I was too young to be out in the streets.
That's youthful and dewy, 46.
But I had grown up my uncle who's was gay. I'd grown up hearing all these stories and seeing all these people. And I spent a lot of time, you may not know this, I'm also black. And one of the things that you do when you're black and you're my age is you kind of wonder, what would I have done during the civil rights movement? Who would I have been? How would I have gotten involved? And as a gay man at my age, you also wonder, God, if I had been living through the heat of that, would I have made it? What would my stance have been? So it's been on my mind my entire life. So I had some ideas about the story I wanted to tell, but then there is a tremendous amount of research. One thing that's great about writing about people in the back half of the last century is there's plenty of video and tape and books, and I could just immerse myself in it. Do yourself a favor and go read the minutes from the New York City ACT UP meeting, because they are the most riotous, irreverent, bitchy notes you've ever seen. It's not dry stuff.
What's something that somebody might have said in one of those meetings?
Oh, they were yelling. They were denouncing one another.
Yeah.
It wasn't just hey, I disagree with you. It's you're wrong, and here's why, and you're no good in bed.
Yeah.
Right? It went. One of the things I like about being gay is no matter how awful the world is being to us, we don't live without humor and without sex. Those two things are always somewhere in the picture.
Yeah.
And that comes through even among the people who were fighting AIDS. That as a survival mechanism, they were rather funny people.
Yeah.
And I think because a lot of books about this period are written trying to convince straight people of our humanity, they're awfully earnest, and so we sort of tone down the bawdiness and we tone down the humor, and it was fun to write a book that didn't have to do that.
I love that. Now, you and several of the panelists have worked in television. What was it like to write a book after doing that for so long?
I should start with saying I love television. Television's been very good to me. Television is a collaborative art. What's wonderful about writing a book is there are no network notes.
Yeah.
There's no testing.
Nobody was told to be more likable?
I mean, not at all. And even if your editor disagrees, if you're willing to stand by it and say, well, I want this in the story, it stays in.
Yeah.
And I love what I get to do in television. It was nice to sort of be able to just sort of stand on my own talent, my own sensibility, and tell a story the way I wanted to tell a story.
I love it. All right. Mark Perry, your book and Introducing Dexter Gaines is set in. Do you have a cord that'll reach you there? Let's see.
We need a wireless one down here.
Oh, okay. Well, I will come down. Well, I will just stand here and do it with you.
All right.
Here we go. Have you always been interested in old Hollywood? Did you fall in love with movies when you were a kid that way?
Yes, NBC Saturday Night at the Movies. Every Saturday night with my mom and dad. And I remember seeing things like The Last Voyage with Robert Stack and Dorothy Malone, and a lot of the Hollywood classics, the Preston Sturges films, and I just loved it. Absolutely fell in love with movies. In fact, my mother told a story that a relative once asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I answered Jimmy Stewart.
That's cool. That's very straight arrow, though. That's good. That's good. But with levels, depth that we haven't quite seen yet.
And gay.
Who did you look at when you were creating your protagonist? The handsome leading man guy was a little Montgomery Clift. Like, who was in the mix?
I kept picturing Tab Hunter, actually.
Nice.
The sort of clean-cut guy, But in truth, when I think about casting it, I can picture who I would cast in the other roles, but I never could picture who I would cast as Dexter if it ever got made into a film. And so I think it would be fun to actually discover somebody for that part.
Yeah, a new face, a fresh face. Did you do much research in terms of what it was like for actors at that time that were gay and like having to be in the closet and choose between a career or love?
Yes, unfortunately, now we live in a time when people are writing about those experiences. So, Tab Hunter's book was wonderful and was very helpful in terms of what it was like being in the closet in Hollywood. And I did all kinds of research into the culture at the time, and how men were, specifically men in this case, how they were maneuvering in the shadows and in fear of being caught. And then the issue with Rock Hudson, who seems to have been completely out in his private life, and yet they managed to, the studio machine just managed to keep that away from everybody, which is just fascinating to me.
Right, because most people of that era had a Rock Hudson story. Like, it wasn't like he was particularly discreet.
Yes, well, because I was writing historical fiction, and I do use a lot of real people from that period in the book, including Rock Hudson, I did hire a lawyer to read the book and advise me, because I didn't want to get in any trouble. And
what came back? What did he come back with?
Well, he came back and he said, anybody, it sounded like a gangster, because he said, you need to make sure everybody's dead. So I took that to heart, and I had originally had a great part for Mitzi Gaynor, and I thought, well, she's still alive. So
you killed Mitzi Gaynor.
I killed Mitzi Gaynor, and no, actually, I substituted Anne Francis, who worked out even better, actually. But, and then he said, he went through all these things, he listed these things, and I was like, I can fix that, I can fix that, I can fix that. And then he didn't say anything about Rock Hudson. And Rock Hudson has one of the more salacious passages in the book. And I said, what about Rock Hudson? And he said, oh no, we used to represent him, that's all true.
I love that. Oh, he's like, yeah, and I've got more where that came from. All right, I love it. Bruce Vilanch, we're going to share a microphone as well. Your book is about some of these bad projects you worked on. I have a bit of a riddle question for you. What's the worst time you had working on a project that turned out good, and what's the best time you had on a project that turned out bad?
Wow.
I know, right?
The worst time I had on a project that turned out good. What turned out good? First, I think of that. Well, I have to say, and she's not dead, but Ellen. Ellen hosting the Oscars was very unpleasant. And it mostly was because I'd known Ellen before she came out, and she was a lot of fun. And once she came out, and which you can never take away the cultural impact that she had, she disappeared into this world of fear. And every second guessing and questioning everything, and became very protective of herself, and withdrew, and made it very difficult to work with. And I have a totally inappropriate joke now, but she had her staff come over from the talk show, and it was like 12 lesbians. And fierce. They were take no prisoners kind of lesbians, and you couldn't get through this barricade, and I said, "You have more dykes around you than Amsterdam."
Did you say that to her?
Yes, and she kind of laughed, and then immediately, changed the subject and withdrew into the core of them. So it was not, but I wasn't the only one. The producer would call her, and the assistant would say, "What's this in reference to?" And the producer says, "It's in reference to the fact that she won't have a job tomorrow if she doesn't call me back in 10 minutes."
Was this the year she did the famous selfie with all the people, or was
this was the first time?
Okay.
No, that was the second time, because she did a good job.
Yeah.
Finally, it turned out good.
Yeah.
And the second time, it was she was a whole different thing, because she had been through it already, and she was already on kind of the path of I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
She had made a tremendous amount of money, and she wasn't going to get canceled anymore.
Yeah.
So she was a looser about the whole thing.
Now, in your book, you write about a lot of projects that are considered bad now. Which one was the most fun?
The most fun? Any of those Oscars. The first Oscar show was great fun. This was the Rob Lowe Snow White show. It was produced by Alan Carr. It was very flamboyant, and we had a great time doing it. And everybody who was on it had fun doing it. And it got infamous because of the Snow White episode. And what that happened because there was a guy running Disney who was pissed off because Disney would not let. He was opening a new theme park in Florida called Disney's Hollywood Studios, and what they were going to do is they wanted to have a commercial on the Oscars that would follow the opening number that would showcase the theme park, and the Academy said you can't have that. You can't endorse we don't do those kind of commercials on the show. And he was really, really pissed off, and so he heard that we were doing the Snow White number. Well, he didn't hear it, actually. He was just kind of seething about the whole thing. And then the show happened, and here's Rob Lowe dancing with Snow White, and he's watching it at home, and he goes ballistic. Because right after that number is a commercial. He made a deal with Chevrolet. They were introducing a new, kind of like a Miata, a small car, and they shot it at the New Hollywood Studio in Florida. And in the forecourt of the fake Grauman's Chinese Theater. And this Miata pulls up, and who gets out of it but, to show you how big the car is, who gets out of it but Snow White and 7 dwarfs. This was to show you that there was roomy. It was roomy, the car. So, and he said, they did this deliberately to sabotage me. And he just went crazy. He sued the Academy, and the Academy was not going to get into a trademark dispute with one of their members, so they backed down, and they cut it out of the archival tape. It's back in. And it all would have blown over in a couple of weeks, except 2 weeks after that, the Rob Lowe sex tape surfaced. You may remember he was at the Democratic Convention, the Dukakis Convention, and he was with an underage girl, and everybody saw this tape. This is pre-internet, so you had to actually get a copy of the tape and watch it at home. People had parties. It was Roman decadence. And every time they mentioned it was Rob Lowe, most recently seen dancing with Snow White on the Academy Award, which caused a lawsuit. So it kind of encased it in the history of bad things, and it's 1989 was like 40 years ago. So, but it was great fun, and it had a terrible reputation. If you look at it,
it's fun.
It's fun. It's fun. It's a fun show. It's very lighthearted. Everybody on it. We didn't want to have we had what I call the no banter zone. Everybody who was on it was with somebody who they related to. They had a reason to be on that stage with each other. And that was fun. That was fun and different.
I love it. Frank mentioned this earlier, and I've never talked to you about this, but you write a lot of patter for artists.
Yes. By the way,
Talk to me about patter, because it feels like it has to feel like something they would say, but it also has to be clever. Like, what's the art of writing patter?
Hysterical, because I've been sitting here. I knew all these people. I mean, I knew Mitzi Gaynor. I knew Betty White.
Yeah.
I turned down Donna Summer. She didn't actually.
that explains it.
What?
That explains it.
Yeah. We had the same agent, and he said, "Do you want to write that?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "No, I want to do all my own stuff. It's all going to be, because she was very church. I mean, it was all she wanted to just say, 'Are you in the spirit?' and that kind of shit." But I don't think she ever really did that joke. I think she said something, and somebody was mad at her because she had gone to Jesus. There were a couple. Actually, they happened to be a couple of lesbians who wanted to meet her, and she wouldn't meet them. And they started this rumor about that she had said this thing on stage that she never said. And once it started, and this was before the internet, once it started, it was like wildfire. And the gays just turned on her, and she was recording for Geffen Records. And even David said, "What did you do? You stepped on your cock. What did you do?" And she said, "I didn't do anything." And it went on like that forever, and she finally had to do make goods and stuff later on. But so I was a witness to all of that. Now then, about pattern. Generally, I started with Bette, and it was because she had to have something to say in between the songs. And she had this fabulous Divine Nusem character, who we call the last of the truly tacky women, and trash with class. And she would shift the mood so often on the stage that she had to say something that would help guide her into that song. And that was how we constructed her act. And we did construct it. We started at the Baz, but once Barry Manilow came in, Barry did all the arrangements, and he's a master arranger. Nobody ever gives him credit. We call him Mary Modulate, because you notice all of his hits, the keys go up to the end, And I write the song. Barry knows how to write a blockbuster thing, and when he met Bette, he was a sub-pianist for a guy who had mono. Remember mono? The guy had mono and couldn't work, and he said, I gave him my friend's number. He's for Juilliard. He reads and everything. And Barry came in, and at the end of the show, Barry went back to her and said, "You are Judy Garland, and I am Martin Lindsay. And I'm going to be your music director forever." And I felt like I was present taken at the flood, But that was until he got his own, deal and everything. But so patterns, it's a construction thing. It's part of the hardest part of it is to make it seem like it's coming off the tongue trippingly at the moment, and that it's not rehearsed and it's not a scripted thing. And some people can do it well, and some people have a harder time doing it. But it's just to make the audience comfortable, basically. And a lot of singers who have no personalities, you have to help create a personality, a stage persona for them, because their music is great, but they are in the studio all the time, or they're sitting at home writing songs, and they are not performers by nature. When you get a Bette Midler who's a performer by nature, it's a miracle. But most of the time you're working with somebody who doesn't have that skill set, and you have to kind of create it for them.
Well, as someone that loves concerts, I like when they talk. I want to hear what they're going to say, and if it feels fresh, it feels special that you're sharing something. So I love when you contribute to those folks. Curtis Chin, your book, Everything I Know, I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. I got to have you on my podcast. I got to read your book. A lot of serious things happen in your book. You talked about that you'd seen people or heard of people that you knew of getting murdered and stuff. And yet there's a magic quality to that restaurant. It feels like a magic place. Can you talk about how you had those two things going on? A lot of the city around you was struggling, and yet it felt like a magic place. I wish I could go there right now.
Sadly, it's not around anymore. I did feel like it was a magic place. Detroit really was a tough place to grow up in the 80s. Just so much everything falling apart, not just murders, but buildings, catching on fire, the city burning down. But we had this really wonderful place, this restaurant, which was magical, right? I mean, it's a humor book, first of all, right? But one of the greatest things was the customers that came in. I mean, literally everybody from, Coleman Young, the first black mayor, to the pimps and prostitutes, to Oscar-winning actors like Yul Brynner. It was just a magical place. All these people came in, and from everybody that came in, I sort of had something I learned from them. And I think that's the heart of the book, is just all the little things that you learn in life by the people that you meet. The thing that I love to share is, the title, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. People ask me, what's the greatest lesson that you learned growing up there? And I always say that it's what my dad taught me, is that, when you're a kid, oftentimes your parents will say, don't talk to strangers. My parents gave me the exact opposite advice. They said, talk to strangers. And who they were talking about were the people sitting in our dining room, because my parents didn't go to college. They didn't know what opportunities existed outside of those four walls of that Chinese restaurant. But they knew that they had this dining room full of people who did. And so anytime my dad met somebody who he thought had like a cool job or just seemed really, happy, he'd call all 6 of us kids to run over and barrage them with questions of like, what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money do you make? And it's just this idea of being able to talk to people that are different from you, and not to be afraid to ask questions, or not to be afraid of asking for help when you need it. And so it was a magical place. I mean, I really miss it all the time.
My parents had a pancake house for a while when I was growing up, Gabriel's Pancake House. The tagline was 30 meals under $1. Can you believe it? Yeah, it was a while ago. But I remember around that. But your character has an adventure, or you do, have an adventure in the walk-in freezer that I never did. That's the scene that I always remember from your book, the walk-in freezer moment. Isn't there some, like a dirty magazine or something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Give us a little taste of that.
As it were.
That's the first time I've been asked about that scene.
I was like, I missed out. I should have done that in the walk-in freezer when I had a chance.
Well, first of all, I've done over 300 book talks. It's been really incredible, the journey of this book. I've done talks everywhere from Korea to Germany. I just came back from 25 talks in Europe this past month, including Oxford University and the British Library. But that's the first time anyone's ever asked about
the
that
walk-in
scene.
freezer. I had access to one for a while and I blew it.
No, it was basically that, because, in Detroit, in that particular area, you can get pornography at any age, even if you're like 10 or 11, they don't card over there. And so we had porn at a very, very young age. And, one time I just, used it to watch porn. That's basically it. I mean, the magazine, not like videos, but yeah.
Right. That's where you would go to have some privacy.
Yeah, because that was the only place in the restaurant where I could, be alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a little cold, but, yeah.
I follow you on Instagram, and your tour is no joke. It's the Eras tour of book tours. Just in a quickly, how do you do that? How did you do that? Are you just emailing, and how did you pull that off?
I'm actually interviewed by USA Today yesterday. There's an article on my book tour, but it basically, the way I pitched it to them was that, in America we have this thing called Heritage Month, and typically, May is Asian American Heritage Month, and I'm usually booked with talks back to back. But then in February, I started getting these cancellations thanks to Donald Trump, right? Like he was taking away funding away from colleges, and so I was losing all these speaking gigs. And then when I got an invitation from this NGO in Amsterdam, and they said they wanted me to come out for a week and a half to do a bunch of talks in, the Netherlands and Belgium, I just thought, okay, maybe I'll just stay out there for a month or so. And I sort of likened it to the idea that, historically, black artists oftentimes escape to Europe, in these difficult times, and wondering if that was going to be the future, where queer and, artists of color, writers of color are going to start, going to Europe more. And so how did that happen? It was just, I had this base, and then from that I just started emailing. It helped that the New York Times did a 2-page profile on me right then, and so I was able to just send them this link and say, hey, do you want me to come and talk? And so, yeah, I mean, I am published with a big publisher, but you still have to do the hustle yourself. Yeah, you do. I mean, because they're spending all their money on all the celebrities, right? And as a midlist writer, I've got to go out there and promote it. And so I just feel like, because it's my first book, like I have to do everything I can to make sure that it's a hit. And so I'm very happy to report that it's already in its 3rd printing after just a year and a half. So, yeah. But I always say, like, you know, I grew up working in that Chinese restaurant. We worked 80 hours a week during the summer, so 40 hours is like a part-time job for me.
What was the show where you actually went to the building? There was a news program where you went back there. You did an interview.
Because you should go look it up online. It's cool.
In Detroit?
Yes, I did an 8-minute segment for CBS Morning News, and then I did another segment for NBC News. I went back with them for another one.
Did you actually went to the place?
Yeah, it could be either one of those.
Love it.
Yeah. So, but the PBS NewsHour interview I did is my favorite. That was a really good interview. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, it was cool to see you in the actual space, so there you go. Nancy, you wrote a book about a woman that goes on vacation by herself, which I do, so I love that idea. I'm a proponent of it. What made you want to write about somebody going on vacation by themselves? Do you do that?
It's funny, I just came back from Mammoth Lakes in Yosemite where I was on vacation by myself.
I love it. I support it.
Well, the reason I was doing that was because I went up to Eastern Sierra Pride up in Mammoth Lakes to promote my book at a big Pride event. This didn't start by me thinking, oh, I'm going to send somebody out on vacation by themselves.
Right.
Can I tell you the genesis?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I want to hear about.
I was my friends have heard the story before, but anyway, I was traveling either to or from the Grand Canyon, and I stopped in Kingman, Arizona. It's always windy in Kingman, Arizona. And I had my passenger side window down. I stopped in Kingman, I opened my door, and the wind blew in and blew all of my papers around like this. And I thought, what a great image to start a novel. Somebody gets lost. Now, I didn't want to set it in the desert because I'm not much of a desert person. I'm a mountain person. I'm a Capricorn. I'm a mountain goat, right? So I thought, I'm going to set it in the Sierra Nevada mountains, but I need to have her have a reason to go on this vacation. So Shelby has had a crush on her boss, Marion, for several weeks. Turns out it's not reciprocal, and Marion is going to marry someone else. And Shelby is heartbroken. So she decides to go on a vacation to get away from Marion. And she's driving up Highway 395, which I just drove up. And a car and some motorcycles go zooming by her, and all of her directions fly around, and they fly out the window. Now, in the mountains, you don't have a lot of cell phone service. So she does stop at a little town along the way and jots down some information about where she's supposed to be going. But once she gets further on up Highway 395, she didn't have cell phone service. She can't figure out where she's going. So she lands at a mountain resort and meets Carol. So that's how it all began.
Yeah.
There's a love story at the heart of your book. I was interviewing somebody recently, and they'd written something kind of sexy and romantic, and their editor was like, more sex, more sex, more sex. So how did you approach the romantic part of it? How did you think about like how much to describe, how to approach it? What was your thought about writing to people falling in love?
No one's ever asked me that before.
Yeah.
It evolves naturally.
Yeah.
I'm not overthinking it. Carol is in the middle of a breakup with someone, but we get flashbacks of their relationship, so there's some sex there. Shelby has had other crushes that didn't pan out, so there's a little sex there. And of course, Shelby and Carol eventually do their thing. But I didn't overthink it. It just evolved naturally.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Now, you have a background in television as well, is that right?
That was so funny to hear all that from everybody.
Yeah, I want to hear what your experience was, books compared to TV.
We can get that later, it's okay. Yeah, I worked on some sitcoms when I first moved out here. You may have heard of them. Roseanne, Blossom.
Oh, no.
And then Desperate Housewives, Ghost Whisperer. And challenging personalities. Although a lot of the people I work with are very talented, but I too reached a point where I said, I am tired of this. And then the Writers Guild strike came along in 2007, 2008, and I got laid off like everybody else did. And I took a short-term gig at UCLA, and it was a tough decision. It was not an easy decision. But I was so tired of the ups and downs and the challenging personalities, and I really wanted to produce my own stuff, I decided to take the job at UCLA, and it's been so rewarding. If I were to drop dead tomorrow, which I don't plan on doing, I am so glad that I have gotten to produce everything. I've done a ton of plays. I did a one-person show at the Hollywood Fringe Festival 2 years ago. I did the film version of Shelby's Vacation before I did the novel version. I've written a web series. So, and like I said, a ton of plays. So it's so much more rewarding.
Just on that. Frank and Jim, how are we doing on time? I have a couple questions for the whole group that I'd like to fire off.
I think we're good.
We're good? All right. So I sent you a couple things in advance that I wanted you to think about. Books matter. Books are important. I think of my own life and what they mean. I asked everyone if there was a book that kind of rocked their world as a reader, whether it was queer or not. But if anyone wants to speak to that kind of really had a big effect on you.
When I was a little kid, To Kill a Mockingbird. I loved Scout and the Nancy Drew books. I loved Nancy Drew and I loved her friends. Tomboy was George, or one of her friends. We didn't have, when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s, man, we didn't have gay characters. So I identified with those, and they gave me hope.
I love that.
There we go.
The way I sort of answer this question is, so I grew up in a Chinese restaurant. We didn't have books. The only book we had was the phone book. So I didn't really read much as a kid, but I do say that I was primed to be a writer because what I had was the stories, literally, meeting all the customers and sitting and listening to them. And the reason I like to point that out is because I think that for kids like me who grew up in working class backgrounds, where we don't oftentimes have access to literature and things like that, it's important for us to know that there are other ways that we're developing and becoming people in order to shape stories and ideas. And it's important for us to know that our stories matter too. So I don't usually point out things like that.
Oh, go ahead. They have menus. That's what's important.
We have menus.
And born in the freezer.
And born in the freezer.
Or in the freezer. When I was a kid, I was taken over by Patrick Dennis, who wrote Anti-Main. That's his most famous. But he's got a bunch of other novels that are phenomenal, and they're all of the 50s, 60s period, and they're all social satires, and they're all they skewer snobs, they skewer people who don't accept other people. As Anti-Main, he created this woman who goes after the anti-Semites, and all of that. And so I identify with him also because his use of language was just absolutely brilliant, and I was just getting to the hang of that. And so he influenced me more than anybody else, and it's not Flaubert, which because when you ask this question, you generally get very high-minded answers.
Right.
But for what I wound up doing for the last 500 years, Patrick Dennis is a great exemplar.
Yeah.
I read when I was a kid too.
Yeah.
It influenced me too.
For me, it was also To Kill a Mockingbird. And it's one of those books that I'll revisit. I've read it, I think, 5 times at this point. I grew up in the civil rights era in the South, outside of Atlanta, and there was a lot about that story that really resonated with me. Another book that was a big life changer was the literary classic, The Poseidon Adventure by Paul Gilroy. That taught me a great deal. And but the book that really, I would say, changed my life, and be honest about it, was Pat Conroy's The Prince of Tides, because having grown up in a conservative household in the South, going to a Southern Baptist church, and being taught that you didn't go to therapy because that meant you were admitting there was a problem, and here I was, deeply closeted. I married a woman, and a wonderful woman. We're still very good friends. But that book said you can be a tough football coach, Southerner, and still end up in therapy, and it will help you. And I went into therapy, and I finally came out, and boy, is life better now. The microphone. The mic club.
Yeah, the first writer who probably stopped me in my tracks was Nikki Giovanni, the poet, who came out very late in life as a lesbian, but I knew the whole time, and I felt so I could read through the poetry. I'm like, I think this genie is her girlfriend or her wife. But it was the first time I felt like someone was writing straight to me, and that was really good because it was poetry that wasn't trying to be for everybody. it was talking to an audience, and I just happened to be in it, and I really enjoyed that. Kurt Vonnegut also kind of rocked my world because I didn't know you could be funny and subversive. I thought that was a great discovery. And then anything by John Ricci, sort of like City of Nights, Numbers, it's just so sexy. Or I found it so sexy, and I wanted writing to be very visceral. I always think it's funny when you're writing about sex because, like, if you're writing comedically and you make people laugh, that's the point. And if you're writing horror and you make people scared, that's the point. And if you write about sex and you make people horny, somehow it's porn. I'm like, maybe you're just a really effective writer. Right? Like, isn't this what we were going for? So those are probably my influences.
I just wanted to say, when coming out, I think that it's interesting where people would turn to for advice, and I know that it's probably way more common, especially now, to turn to the internet. For me, for some reason, it was memoirs by gay writers, and that was what was really helping me. And I remember reading a lot of Paul Monette. I read a book by Bernard Cooper, a memoir of a mother and son who wrote together, Christopher Shire and Marlene Fantasshire. So many of these people just had lives that were so relatable to me. Maybe they were suburban, maybe they were my age or a little bit older. And then in 1996, just as I was really a late bloomer in coming out, my dad bought I was living at home with my parents. My dad bought a different newspaper than he usually bought because my brother was looking for a job, and it had, so it had better want ads apparently. And there was a piece on this book called A Boy Named Phyllis, a suburban memoir. It was written by a guy who grew up in, it turns out, the very next town from where I grew up. And he was Italian American, and I just thought, I have to read this book because everything in the interview with him and his parents seemed so relatable. And I read the book, and I think fell in love with the author like I fell in love with all the authors I had read, Paul Monette and whatever, but Monette was dead. And a lot of these authors I fell in love with their spirit, but I think I fell in love with the author of A Boy Named Phyllis a little more deeply than I did with any of the rest of them, because I've been with him now for 29 years.
So now I have to say Golden Girls Forever is my favorite. I feel bad, when we were talking about falling in love with poetry, I have friends who say, it's our anniversary, we always read our favorite poems to each other. And I read someone posting that on Facebook, someone I went to college with, and I said to Jim, we have a favorite episode of Laverne and Shirley. It's not quite the same as our favorite poem on our anniversary. So it's a little bit different. One of the books that when people say, what's your favorite book? Fiction for me would be, I read a lot of showbiz memoir, which I think is not necessarily looked on as the heaviest lifting, but I love it anyway. I love memoir so much. But in terms of fiction, I love the book Geek Love. And not only because the cover is spectacular, it has the best. You can't judge a book by its cover, and it was wonderful. But I love anything that you either. I like things that make you laugh and then make you cry. And this, if you ever read Geek Love, you read the first page and you're like, this is the most fucked up thing I've ever read in my life. And by the last page, you'll be weeping. And, you're reading that last page and sobbing at the end, not a tear, a sob at the end of it. And so I like anything that takes you to a place you didn't think it was clever enough to take you to or moving enough to take you to. And I think when if you're writing something that's funny, like a memoir about, that includes porn in a freezer, or A Boy Named Phyllis. We had penis fashion shows where we would pretend that they were models and show it with old flashlight. Oh, this is from the Paris collection. So, and I wrote about all that stuff. And poor Jim, who wrote the wonderful Golden Girls Forever. But, I like anything that takes you to a place that you don't think it's going to take you to. And one of the people who had a huge influence on my life is Bruce Vilanch, because so many of that things that he wrote that I've committed to memory are the funniest thing you've ever heard. And by the end of it, she's just ripped your heart out and handed it back to you and go, well, do you need a Kleenex now for crying? Because now I'm going to rip your heart out. And so I admire anything that gives you all of the emotions and all the feels while making you laugh, or at least starting at that place and then going to a deeper thing. Because I do think any kind of comedy and anytime you made someone laugh with something you've written, I think that you've, I don't know if you've made a friend, but you've found a way in to a stranger's life. And you can teach a lot of people about different people by making them laugh or feeding them or any number of ways that we all are, the same. And I do think we, laughter, hunger, all the most primal parts of being a human being, we can reach as writers. If you that spoonful of sugar really helps, and I think that's what we try to do.
I think I could not have written Hollywood Pride without the existence of the celluloid closet. And as a teenager, I read a lot of film criticism, like, Pauline Kael's books and that kind of thing. And I remember I would always sort of find that area of the Dewey Decimal System, with those books. And the celluloid closet was the one that I could never check out, but I would stand in the stacks for hours and read it, as a closeted teen. So yeah, that was massively influential to me. And I got to meet Vito Russo about 6 months before he passed. And so that's a moment I treasure.
That's amazing. All right, we're going to wrap it up. I have one more question for everyone to just go down the line and just answer this and say a little about it. Writing books is hard. You don't always make a lot of money. If you go through it, you want to quit. It's awful. Then you get through it. What does it mean to you now that it exists, that it's out there? What has it brought to your life? What does it mean to you that it's there now?
It's so fulfilling. So fulfilling. My heart is full. Yeah. And I just drove up Tioga Pass Road a few days ago and took a video of that road. And 17 years ago, I drove up that road to go on a camping trip with my friends to Saddlebag Lake and took a picture. And we used that photos from 17 years ago on the cover of the book. So I had a full circle moment about 10 days ago because I was there again. It's cool. Yeah.
I love it. One of the great joys of being on this big book tour is that we've had so many of my former customers from our restaurant come to my readings. And my favorite moment is I did a reading in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and at the end of it, this 6-year-old white woman gets up and she says, "Has anybody here eaten at Chung's?" And nobody had because they're in Massachusetts. But she said, "I grew up in Detroit. Your family's restaurant was my favorite restaurant growing up. My family went there every Sunday night." And she said, "I told my mom I was coming to this reading, and her mom, who has dementia now, started recounting all of our dishes in vivid details." And she said, for the first time in years, she felt like she had her mom back. And that was very moving to me because, growing up in that restaurant, I always knew that my parents were struggling to give us a better life. What I didn't appreciate was that they were also trying to give Detroiters a better life, too, because our city was really struggling during that time period. Every place was closing down. There were very few places for people to go and just have a nice, comfortable meal. And, the fact that my parents are doing that just really gave me more respect for them. And so I think that's been the wonderful thing is, hearing from all these people how much my family's restaurant mattered to them.
That's great. That's sweet. Well, I've written for some of the other people. It's nice that I've written for myself, and people are telling me, "Oh, it's funny, it's good, we like it." And so that's unusual because I'm always getting filtered through other people. But on a political note, I just want to point out I worked on a movie called Can't Stop the Music, the Village People movie, and that's a chapter in the book because it's a legendary disaster. And there's at Chicago Review Press, there's a young activist gay editor who was my editor. A great guy, and he's meticulous and all that. And he said, Bruce Jenner was one of the stars of the movie. And he said, "Well, you can't dead name Caitlyn Jenner." And I said, "First of all, my name was Caitlyn, and I changed it to Bruce." And that went nowhere with him. And then I said, it was 40 years ago. He was Bruce Jenner. He was at the time the most famous person in the world because he had won the decathlon at the Olympics. He was on every Wheaties box on every breakfast table in the world. I said, and he was known as Bruce Jenner. To write this thing, as if it's Caitlyn Jenner doing all of this stuff in 1980, would be insanity. He said, no, you can't do that. You can't dead name him. So I took it to the publisher, who said, yeah, you're right. You can't. You have to use his name. And this guy, it was the only argument that we had in the whole book. And I finally said, look, I will call Caitlyn, who I know. I've known for 40 years. And I called Caitlyn and I told her the story. And she said, what's wrong with him? I was Bruce Jenner then. What fantasy is it coming to say? So I thought, okay, one for the home team. It indicated to me something that I thought for a long time. There is a dedicated humorlessness about the woke generation that rears its ugly head every now and again, and this was a prime example of it. You just have to look past the politics of the moment and realize what's real and what isn't. And I thought to myself, I scored a small victory for myself doing that, and it made life much easier for me.
I've wanted to be a writer since I was in third grade. I had a teacher who inspired me to be a writer, and I wanted to write books, I wanted to write plays, I wanted to write movies, I wanted to write television because of the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I finally got my first break in television, and I got seduced by television because I love instant gratification, and I worked in TV for about 35 years. And then when I sat down to write my book, I really wanted to see if I could. And so the fact that it's now out and it seems to be doing reasonably well and it's getting very nice reviews from people who don't know me is a very, very gratifying thing. And it's such a different experience to know that I'm not writing scripts for people to make and take the make-believe and turn it into something that looks like reality. I'm writing movies for people in their heads, and there's only one audience at a time, which I just find very intimate, and I love it. Once again.
I think my answer is probably very similar to yours. Television being so collaborative and filtered through so many people, you can lose sense of what your voice even is. Who am I after all these years, and what can I do? And it was again, I'm glad it's been received well and it's done well. I really just wanted to sort of stand on my own 2 feet and see what my voice could do. Can I hit these notes? Can I make it reach the back of the cathedral? And there was just a lot of pride in doing it. You have to get blurbs when you have a book come out. And I had to ask Andrew Sean Greer, who won the Pulitzer for Less, and I'd never met him. But he read the book and he agreed to do it. And he wrote me this really wonderful email. And so I come down crying to tell my husband about this. And it was really nice because I was like, I don't care what anybody says next. He thought it was good. And he thought I was funny. And I'd sort of been looking, I think, for that validation from not just a general audience, but from people who you know really know craft and what know skill. And you just want to sort of be able to measure up against your peers. And that's been the best.
I think I do it for a lot of reasons. I think since my parents died years ago, I've been a little bit obsessed with the notion of one's legacy. And I feel like I can help just put some light on the careers of people I admire in what I'm doing. And I think that's what I do well, is I shine a light and bring the best out in the subjects that are interviewed in the book or whom I'm writing about. And I always write, I'm lucky because I don't write about things I don't love. And so to be able to share my enthusiasm is really part of doing it. Now, speaking of enthusiasm, the most exciting thing, and I don't know if everyone feels this way, the day you get the first actual copy of your book is one of the most thrilling moments when you open that box and you take one out and the baby is beautiful. It is the greatest thing. And I am someone, if someone hands me their real baby, I'm like, no, take this away. I don't want your baby. No. But a book baby, thrills me, and I tug, you hold it very gingerly. You don't want to drop it or anything, and it's one of the most thrilling things. And as for when you say when there are people who remind you that what you're doing is important, I don't know how you guys feel, and this is a whole other discussion. I have had a hard time with my disco book getting the gay press interested in it, which does not make sense to me at all. Vanity Fair loved it and featured it. The Chicago Tribune loved it and featured it. The New York Post loved it and featured it. The two largest gay magazines, nothing. Okay, no notice what? No, we don't care. No matter how much I beg, they don't care. So that's a little frustrating to me. But then you get an email from someone you really admire. The guy who wrote I Feel Love and Love to Love You Baby for Donna Summer sent me an email, and the opening line was, how does it feel to have written the best book on the subject ever? And it was like, I'll take that. You just have to remind yourself, because even though you do get those, because we're all people and do what we do, I think fragile ego is part of it. There is that moment where you're like, yet again, these are the one person in the front who's not paying attention is the only one you notice when the 800 people are going, oh, I love it. But that one person's going to stick in your craw. And so you have to remind yourself that that one person is not the one who matters. Your Pulitzer Prize winner, or the guy, or the guy who wrote a song we can all dance to and love is more important.
Yeah, the tangibility of it is exciting. I think, Dennis, anybody who's written for the internet for the last 25 years, that stuff just disappears sometimes. Websites decide that they don't care about this article that you sweated over, 15, 20 years ago. And so, yeah, a lot of stuff that I've written is just poof into the digital, oblivion. And so to have a hard copy on a shelf and to know that in some library somewhere it's always going to be there, is thrilling. And for my books, I've never really taken an assignment that's just like an assignment. It's always been something I've been really enthusiastic about. And for me, my books are a way to get all the stuff that's swimming around in my head on paper. And I'm sure, like, if you're a novelist, I'm sure have the same thing. But it's this notion of like, if I get hit by a bus, this is all lost. But if I can write it down and have it bound between covers, then it will outlive me.
Can I just add one thing? I was going to say, I always think, I'll be dead, and some queen who's not born yet will buy this at a flea market.
I think the answer to the question really for me is sitting on this stage, everyone who's sitting on the stage, because it certainly isn't always lucrative to write books. For me, it's never been lucrative to write books. But we all, with our work, whether it be memoir or be nonfiction or be fiction, all of your books have influenced somebody in some way, some person you may not even know. And, the people whose memoirs I mentioned, who I read, they don't know me. They don't know that I read the book and what the effect it had on me. The one who wrote A Boy Named Phyllis does know the effect it had on me that I didn't even expect.
I've ruined his life, people.
So I just think that's the most gratifying thing. And sometimes you do, like Curtis said, you do get people who come up to you that you didn't know you had a connection to, or that you made a connection to with your creativity, who you've changed. And that being said, as much as books did that for me, TV always did that for me. And, I grew up watching way too much TV, partly because of my family situation. I had a disabled sibling who my parents tried to get to be able to talk by having him watch constant Diet of Sesame Street and Electric Company, and it never worked. But for me, I could read by the time I was 2 because I sat all day with him in front of the television. And so the TV literally was my teacher. And I think I also got the social lessons along with the phonics. I was getting the social lessons and didn't realize it. So I was learning things about the world from types of people I didn't see in a very white New Jersey suburb. I was learning more liberal lessons than I think I was going to get at home. And when I started to become a journalist, I was writing about current shows, and sometimes they'd be cheesy reality shows. It wouldn't always be something that would really change your world or be high-minded. But I wanted to always, as I said, write a book about the Golden Girls. And when I look back at the shows, Will and Grace chose me because it was an open writing assignment and I auditioned. But Golden Girls was my brainchild, my baby that I wanted to do. And I also wanted to write about The Love Boat, and I wanted to write about All in the Family, when I got that chance to write with Norman Lear. And when I look back at what all of those shows have in common, it's how they changed the world and further human rights and further gay rights. And so I think that those books were not lucrative. They weren't lucrative as books. Certainly, I don't have any share of the TV show that I'm promoting. So it's not making me money, but it's just kind of, I think, highlighting again, as Frank said and as Alonso just said, the work of people that I don't want lost to the ages, because some of these people that I've interviewed for all of these books are now gone, and I'm glad that I rescued their stories and put them in print where they can live on and where other people will, further generations of generations, will be inspired by them.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you guys for coming and being on the channel and for your work. Thank you guys all so much for coming out. And there are books for sale that you can buy and have signed, so stick around and do that. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks to all the authors that took part in that panel, and thanks to Frank DeCaro and Jim Colucci for inviting me to be part of it. This was the first year of that Pride Live Hollywood Fest, and it was a blast, so I can't wait to see what they cook up for next year. All right, so this happened. As you can probably hear in my voice, I've been under the weather, so I laid pretty low this week, but I did discover a TV show that I've been meaning to watch for a while now, Étoile on Amazon Prime. It's the dance series about ballet from Amy Sherman Palladino and the other Palladino husband person. I think I'm saying it right, Étoile, and it means star in French, and I loved it. It's got that snappy dialogue that they're known for. It's clever. But it's about dance, which moves me very much. And there's a couple of gay men in the show. At least we presume they're gay, maybe bisexual, and they have this kind of chemistry unfolding throughout the 8 episodes. And I can't think of a couple that I've wanted to get together more in media. Of like, I want them together so badly. It's Tobias and Gavin are the characters' names, and Gavin is the French ballet dancer, and he's beautiful. And Tobias is the eccentric choreographer, and he is a pain in the ass. Like, he needs all of these things to be just so he can do his work. He's like that weird creative genius, pain in the ass, high maintenance, I can't work in this room, or like weird shit. And somehow, Gideon Glick is the actor, somehow you love him anyway, and you want these two guys to be together. And watching that slow burn throughout the 8 episodes was really thrilling, and it had a wonderful payoff at the end. So sadly, the show, I think, got canceled, but I loved it. If you like dance, if you like fun dialogue, fresh characters, lots of funny stuff, I highly recommend it. All right, that's enough for this week. I want to give a shout-out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for placement music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye!